Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Chris, and he is with Wolf Clan Media. And he's interviewed me a couple times. We just did a recent interview about Johnny Depp, Damien Eccles. Very timely kind of subject about this. Seeing that this trial has now at least gone to the jury, and I don't know what the result. I predict that Johnny Depp is going to lose. But I also interviewed with Chris about my book, Prophet of Evil. And he sold a couple of books through them. I actually have them about ready to be sent out tomorrow. Today's a holiday. But I interviewed him in the past on his excellent documentary, 9/11 Alchemy, A Big Lie. So I recommend people go to his website. In the show notes, I will put a link to his website. You can see that and the documentary that we're going to discuss today, which I think YouTube might shut down the stream. So you can listen to its entirety on Twitter or Rumble or Odyssey or Facebook. You can check out William Ramsey Investigates. Title of this documentary is Seagate, Big Pharma, Switzerland, and Organized Crime. And he's done an excellent job in putting together these, a lot of things that here in the States I don't think we see, and obviously nobody wants to really report on these huge pharmaceutical companies that have a huge influence upon us, particularly in these times. And their tendrils and all the stuff that they've done in the past. It really, and all these people you see on the news, like I've seen this guy Gottlieb on the show almost every day. Like he's just a public figure now, and he's a fascist. He's part of this group. It's shocking. It shows how our media has already been compromised, which is part of the story. But Chris can talk about that. So Chris of Wolf Clan Media, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, William.
Awesome. So for people who may not have heard our earlier interviews or are not familiar with your work, can you kind of talk about the research? You said you've researched this subject for 2 years. Can you talk about how your research kind of commenced? And I've seen some familiar things, some books in here, Coleman's book. Can you kind of talk about your research and how you put together this documentary, please?
Yeah, this all, my research in general just started probably really heavy, not so much being a follower and doing my own work and putting out my own content. In 2017, I produced 9/11 Alchemy, started that series, and there's 3 documentaries now. So the last one you mentioned, Big Idea, is up, and that's the most recent one. It kind of ties into the occult. So your book was absolutely essential part of the research for that film. And really, 9/11 has been like the focus. But obviously, we went through this psyop for, the last 2 years. A global psyop, similar to September 11th, with some of the same characters and some of the same language. But this time it really affected everybody all across the world. And what made me make this film is the same thing that made me make the 9/11 films is there's just things that no one talks about. And once again, like, you can follow the truth movement, you can follow these alternative media sites, these popular people, I won't drop any names, but people know the alternative media is basically trademarked now. And I started noticing, it's just like a standard. You have the mainstream consensus, and then you have an alternative consensus where it's like, yeah, China, bioweapons, and Fauci, and and just the same old things. And it wasn't really hard for me to realize who was profiting from the PCR technology. That was the first thing I did. And when I realized it was Roche Pharmaceuticals, and that they were located in Switzerland and happened to be agenda contributors to the World Economic Forum, among many, many, many other things. It just it came like storming in like a ton of bricks. I realized, wow, it's a pretty obvious conspiracy, if you will, And,
it's incredible. When you really think about it, they figured out how to they call it a public-private partnership, but it's really fascism. It's really just as simple as fascism as you can imagine. But nobody really wants to call these guys fascists, but they're dictating agendas through the government and actually putting their people in the government to make these statements. The mandate is a force. Like it's like a king. You are mandated to make this decision. A lot of people had to take these treatments without really any, unconsent, no lack of consent. It's actually one of the fundamentals of like the Nuremberg Code and stuff like that.
Yeah, but, and it's interesting because you actually mentioned that over 10 years ago in your Prophet of Evil. You warned about what is now happening as a result of this, this psyop, this Seagate that we went through, and And that's the thing that really got me. You mentioned before we started here, Scott Gottlieb, and I talk about him a lot in the film. I started noticing that he was on television a lot, and when you look into the guy, you realize he was actually responsible for the whole bird flu scare. Not solely, but with the help of Roche Pharmaceuticals and Genentech, which is the American version of Roche. It's basically the same company. It is the same company. It's just the American subsidiary, and that's how they were able to pull this off. And it's just another example, similar to September 11th, of good technology being used for evil purposes. PCR can be used to exonerate innocent people, and it has been. But instead, they used it to pull off, the biggest psyop in human history so far.
Can you explain the PCR test, Kerry Mullis, and kind of how strange it is that he died? Like you had that guest on, Ian Davis, who wrote Pseudo Pandemic. He's featured in this documentary. But it really was fortunate for what happened over the last 2 years that Kerry Mullis died 6 months before it started, right?
Yeah, it's very convenient, isn't it? And it, when I started looking at Kerry Mullis, obviously there was a lot of stuff going viral during the pandemic, and I tried to stay away from all the stuff going viral. And there was a lot of clips of Kerry Mullis, talking about how PCR isn't really used to tell you if you're sick or not. And but those clips would be taken out real, just out of something a lot longer context. And so I started doing my own digging and looking into it. And sure enough, like they were doing this with HIV, and he was speaking out about it. And Roche Pharmaceuticals purchased the rights to his technology, and he wasn't happy about it. He said, "Screw the Swiss." So yeah, Kerry Mullis just so happened to pass away just months, I think, or was it even? I don't.
I think it was 6 months before the pandemic started. I think it was.
It was actually 6 weeks.
2019. Oh, 6 weeks. Okay, I got it wrong.
Because it was. I want to say it was like November or something, right before. Just yeah.
And he was known to be contrarian, right? So he was even a contrarian against AIDS, which is some of these same bums are in there. Fauci is all over AIDS and getting this drug, which name I can't remember people to take, but Mullis was like, hey, this is not the way you can tell this is it. And
yeah. And you see Fauci again back in the 90s with the whole, AIDS thing. And it just, you see the same characters. You have to start asking yourself, what's going on here. And then what really got me is the Italian names. It was, no matter what I did, these names were Italian. And I was like, well, that's kind of, I never really put that together and realized how much of American politics has Italian influence. And of course, all roads lead back to Rome. And when you start doing research into the church and things, you're like, oh, well, duh. But that wasn't something I had done before, so that was all very new to me. And seeing Gottlieb and Fauci and their parents immigrated from Italy, and they're in pharmaceuticals. And I just thought, wow, well, this is kind of strange. And eventually that did lead me to Switzerland. But there's really a strange tie there between the Vatican and Switzerland and organized crime and the mafia. And that was really another thing too with Donald Trump. It all tied in with the mafia. It was like this dude had, Donald Trump has ties to the mafia around every corner. I mean, left and right. And so it's like, and really anyone in New York who's doing politics or business or construction has had some run-in with the mafia, right? So it's just, it just seemed all these things. I hadn't heard anyone talking about them. So I had to make the film. It was one of those things where why again are we 2 years into this and no one is talking about these things? No one's mentioned Roche. We've heard Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, Moderna, BioNTech, these companies, but who did this to us? It was Roche. Wow. Yeah, and they're they're the number one pharmaceutical company in the world. That's what people don't realize. They are number one, and number two is also located in Switzerland. It's Novartis. They own a portion of each other. It's just like the whole BlackRock and Vanguard, this, shared ownership. I don't really know how all that works, but clearly these are the people calling the shots. So why isn't it being talked about in these big films like Scamdemic or Plandemic or whatever, the names are going viral? But all they're saying is China, Fauci, bioweapons, why isn't anyone talking about what's really going on? That's why I made it.
And it goes in and it ties in with all of these, your research ties in with what we see at the World Economic Forum, Davos, And it
Exactly.
really is incredible what the Swiss allow their
Mm,
corporate executives, their families to do in that very small country. I think it's only 6 million population. It's nothing.
yeah. And when you realize that, it's a total mind blow, and it's obvious. It was almost for me like I felt like, wow, how did I miss that? How do you miss that all these years? Like it's the only country you can attack. It's the old trope of having a Swiss bank account. You see it in films. That's where you go to hide your money. Criminals go hide their money, but no one really realizes it. And this whole time, people are talking about, as you said, Davos and the World Economic Forum. Well, let's look over there. And that's what no one really is doing. And here's the thing: is what's really important. Because some people would say, I even saw some comments about this film being 2 years too late. Well, a lot of people again are just hearing things and repeating what they hear. They see something and just run with it on Facebook, it goes viral. But when it comes down to getting to the truth, which is what I've always been about, you actually have to do the research and kind of ignore what everyone else is saying. You can't follow the consensus. You have to be anti-paradigm in order to actually find the truth. And again, no one is talking about Switzerland and these pharmaceutical companies and how they tie into organized crime. And it just so happened that this Ukraine-Russian war started in February, I think 24th. Well, on February 20th was the biggest leak in the human history of Swiss bank accounts. And it's called Swiss Secrets. You can Google it. There's a Wikipedia page. It was sent to, I think, like 20 something media outlets, including the New York Times, one of the biggest. But of course, that did not become a story because the Ukraine, and it's outrageous for people to think that you could actually, that bankers, in Switzerland could start a war in two other countries just to cover up their dirty laundry. But I mean, this is what's going on. And that leak that just happened, it has, King Abdullah of Jordan right next to money launderers and drug cartel members. And it's all available, but no one's paying attention because Switzerland makes
I never heard of it until you mentioned it. So
yeah,
I
it's
was, and I
very
try to stay pretty well informed on
it's
non-corporate media.
right. And that's the thing. And I think a lot of people are in this, like, I'm pretty informed. I kind of know what's going on. But then you start realizing there's like these teams of truth seekers where like some people are like, oh, it's all the, Israel and them over there. And then it's all Jesuits and this
Right.
guys or the Freemasons. But nobody, and I mean nobody, is pointing at Switzerland. And that's
No.
and that's who it is. And the Knights Templars founded that country. It's very very shady. There's so much symbolism there, so much satanic symbolism all over. You have the child eater of Bern eating children, the statue I showed in the credits towards the end. I mean, that country is just evil. It's evil.
It's really incredible. And they were involved in a lot of shenanigans with the Nazis. Dulles was there. A lot of the Nazis got rat lined through there to Italy, to South America. Um, and we talked about in the pre-show that was where LSD came from, which kind of
Yeah.
psychedelicized the whole world, So, or
That
at
was
least
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because I didn't really tie that in too much in the film, but it was almost too much of a coincidence. It's like, wow, Hoffman.
right. And that's the name of the family that runs Roche, right? It's the Hoffman family,
Right.
and billions of dollars, like known billions of dollars. But and they're, I think you said they had 18 years of increased sales in vitamins, so they're superpower, huge.
Oh yeah. Let me just move this here.
But
Sorry.
I think what's interesting too is that they're not just business people; they are involved with Schwab and all these other characters. They have their hand in creating the kind of global agenda, the fourth industrial revolution. So they're not just passive, I'm just going to, worry about the nickels and dimes. They're involved in generating the environment where they can manipulate the public, right? I mean, they're talking about the new social contract, trying to build trust with the public.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that was the point of bringing them up and why I focus so much on the Hoffman LaRoche family. They are the oldest family in Switzerland. No one's ever heard of them. I've never heard of them. Most people are not talking about them. Even if you get into the real fringe stuff like the black nobility and the 12, families of the ancient bloodlines, you still don't hear about Hoffman LaRoche. And I even found, I guess you would call it a society in Switzerland called the DAG, I think is how you pronounce it, DAIG, DAG. And this is basically an aristocracy, and they are part of it. They actually like helped form it in the early, I can't remember exactly when, but in the early founding of Switzerland. And these aristocrats, they actually differentiate themselves from other very wealthy people. Very wealthy people in Switzerland can be extremely wealthy, but if they have what they call new money, they're not part of the DAG and this other aristocracy. I mean, these people really
The
do.
nouveau riche, yeah.
It reminds me of, how you speak about Crowley, and very much these aristocrats, they think of themselves as higher ups almost to all of us.
Very much classist and happy to maintain that class structure, intermarrying, interbreeding with each other.
Indeed.
And Switzerland is very exclusionary. The whole country, you cannot become a citizen. It's very hard to get citizenship. You can live there. There's actually families, intergenerational families, who lived in Switzerland who do not have citizenship. So
Wow.
My grandpa would live there, and I'm his son. I'm not a citizen. You have to really turn some screws to become a citizen there. It's very, very hard.
And I just found out that you have to have your vaccine passport to travel there now.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And we saw in Davos, they had their own Davos police guard for this whole, convention of monsters who were there, like Kissinger and all these other people.
Yeah. And again, for people who think that Trump was going to rescue us from all this, look at how he was welcomed at Davos. Look at how he's hugging on Klaus Schwab.
And Giuliani too, right? I think that's very important for people to see Giuliani getting knighted by these Italian black nobility. And there is actually, there were nobles, they're known as black nobles in Italy. It's very unusual for Americans. But
the Giuliani thing, it's so important you brought that up, because what is that? That was right around 9/11. And why is a person who's being knighted, a person who stopped the Italian mafia, right? Before this guy was a district attorney, I believe it was. And he's been credited for, bringing down the New York mafia. And he's being knighted by, basically Italian mafia, and then becoming the president's personal lawyer during all of this shenanigans, right? And that's really important. It's really important for people to realize the organized crime aspect of that, because I don't think any of this would have happened without organized crime. So it's important you brought up Giuliani.
Right. I mean, it is really incredible. I mean, that's just one connection. So he's got an Order of Malta, if I remember, an Order of Savoy.
Yeah.
These are old line, very old line orders of control, really, what you had originally call fascist, which, the left would call fascist, but it's really the old aristocratic money landed families and stuff like that. That's what they do, is they give these orders, or even the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which changed its name to whatever, the Windsors, they hand out Order of British Empire or something like that. So that's how they kind of.
And again, these people, they don't think the way we think. Again, if you were to ask them if they're British, no, they're aristocrats. They are not that's important for people to realize, that this classist, like you said. And it's interesting that you keep mentioning fascism, because Italy, this is what really struck me was the P2 Masonic Lodge propaganda do, which is a fascist secret society that was banned by the regular Masonic Lodge. And that's saying something. If you're being banned by a satanic organization already, and a fascist organization, and it's interesting because you know about the history with the fascist regime in Italy, but it seems a lot of fascist stayed in power in Italy through mafia, organized crime, and Freemasonry. And that was what really struck me. You'll see in my film, and I've not seen this anywhere else, is the connection between organized crime and Freemasonry. I mean, aside from them having very similar blood oaths, I believe the blood oath with the mafia is pricking your finger with the card of the angel of Michael, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a blood oath, right?
It's a blood oath, right? And then you burn a piece of paper or something like that.
And it's interesting because the Navy, I think the Templars and the Freemasons, they have the sword touches the breast, right? And the blood. Well, the Navy happens to do the pinning, where they smack their chest as hard as they can and pin themselves. And it's really, that's all goes back to the Knights Templars, and really Freemasonry was probably born out of the Knights Templars. And that's what I started realizing is when you really
still have the Order of de Molay in the
it's
the introductory order to get into the Masons, and
yeah,
Jacques de Molay was the head.
I didn't know a lot of that.
Yeah,
I
the
didn't
head of
know.
the Templars, right? And the
Yeah.
Templars were supposed to be responsible for bringing in really dark black magic from the Middle East. So that's why you have the Baphomet associated with them.
And I don't dive into any of that in the film at all. I keep the film very, very fact-based. It's all mostly about PCR, who the shareholders are, what is the global public-private partnership, as you mentioned, that was coined by Ian Davis. Ian Davis wrote the book Pseudo Pandemic. It's important for people to check that out. And I actually heard him mention Roche. So he did his research, and he realized that Roche profited a lot from the bird flu and swine flu, the 2009. Every time there's been some kind of scare, you can find Roche, and even Scott Gottlieb there mentioned and connected in some way. And so that really struck me. And again, that just all ties back to Switzerland in the strangest ways. Even though, again, like I said, there is these connections to Italy, but it should be pointed out that Switzerland is neutral. They don't have military, right? But they have a reserve. I believe you have to have arms, and you have to join the reserve and military. And
every person is given an assault rifle.
Right,
so
right.
You're brought up with your own assault rifle.
You're right, and they have bunkers too. It's important to note that they have the most bunkers, I think, than any country, possibly Greenland too. But I think some bunkers are requirements for some citizens, and it's really interesting. But the Swiss Guard doesn't, engage in any war, right? They haven't engaged in war in forever. Well, they just so happen to protect the Pope, and I think it's really interesting. Nobody really knows why that is. The Swiss cantons have been in contract with the Vatican for centuries, and I mean centuries. It goes back further than we can really figure out. So we don't know why.
They have a very distinctive dress, and you can see them at the Vatican now, which is another kind of strange place. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother show. But it is interesting how, when you research, you found out that a lot of these mafia groups, the 'Ndrangheta and all these people in southern Italy, were trying to get into pharmaceuticals. They knew it was profitable,
and did. I mean, you can find headline after headline now how the mafia is now profiting from their medical takeover in 2020, and it's like, wow, really? And people should know, if you're in America, that the Italian mafia is still very, very powerful in Italy, and probably here in the United States as well. Again, just look at all the Italian names that I named, and not to be, discriminating toward. I mean, I have Italian blood in me somewhere, I'm sure, on my mother's side. But the point is that you can't, there was this case. Do you remember Amanda Knox?
Very much. I've done shows about her. Yeah.
Right. So someone pointed out to me that you can't go commit a crime. You can't just go out and be a criminal in the city in Italy without permission. And it's true. You have to join these clans, and you're working on behalf of the mafia a lot of the times. If you're a career criminal in Italy, you have ties back to the mafia. And so that's important. And politically, and like we were talking about with Freemasons, that's how all this was done. The mafia infiltrates Freemasonry and vice versa. And really, which one's more dangerous? Who knows? And then they infiltrate political organizations and pharmaceutical organizations. And that happened. And it was happening. You can really see in 2016, if you look into what you just mentioned, in 2016, right after Donald Trump became president, the mafia started going in nursing homes. I mean, you name it, pharmaceuticals, medical industry, all over. So it's really interesting that happened.
Right. And it's not the mafia of the 50s and 60s or even the 20s in the United States. They're much more sophisticated. They have much better corporate cover. Profession. They're still there. Yeah.
It's all about bloodlines and business. It's bloodlines and business for them. It's nothing more.
You can just see the same progression of the mafia really follows the Godfather series. First part is the family, and then at the end, there's just a massive corporate boss in Italy. We're talking about massive billion-dollar deals. And there's Michael, so
Right.
It's not,
And
it's
and
much
what I
more honest. And it mentioned just one more thing. Sorry to interrupt, but they
yeah,
do
no,
mention the Roberto Calvi murder, which was a Masonic murder. I don't know if you realize that, but he
yeah.
was found hanging upside down on that bridge
Mhm.
in a very peculiar fashion. He was
Yeah, didn't
hung
he have
by one leg. Yeah.
one leg? That's what it was.
And with
He
its cross, it was the hanged man. It was resembling the hanged man
which is
tarot card.
which is interesting because we see that in 9/11 with one of the falling, and they made a documentary with the falling man doing in that shape, and I just thought, wow, how interesting, and that always brings me back to the spiritual aspect of some of that. But wasn't Roberto Calvi also didn't he have like a bunch of currency stuffed in his pockets, like different currencies, and
Yeah, I think
really
that,
simple. And it was in the financial district of
yeah,
London, so
yeah. It
yeah.
was all super suspicious. Yeah,
And he
I
had
mean,
ties to the P2 Masonic Lodge. So as you mentioned, that was probably a Masonic murder, and it was a ritual. And
inside job. So they ritualized it. Yeah. So
what really got me though, what really, really struck me, and again, like we talked about pre-show, it hit me like a ton of bricks because I think we all know this inside, but don't realize it is where are all of the NGOs and nonprofits and international organizations located? And they're all in Switzerland. I mean, everyone you can think of, from the international LGBTQ community to the Red Cross to the internet. I mean, every international, everything you can think of is located in Switzerland.
right, you make that point in the book, right? So you've got, let's see, it was the ICC, SAIC. Oh God, what's
Yeah,
the banking one?
the Bank of it for International
Yeah,
Settlements.
that the bank and central bank of all central banks. It's
Exactly.
just everything's there,
When do
and
you hear talk about that? I mean, you don't.
never,
So,
never.
right.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of the original research, and also there's a weird Epstein tie because his black book that was released, there are clubs there that nobody in the West has ever heard that he was a part of. There was a couple of ski chalets and things, so
Oh,
he was
wow.
so he was networked into some of that stuff. I don't think he was. I think he really was kind of an elite servitor,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's why he had to go. But I
Well,
think that
of course. And anyone who's if you have any ties into the elite circles, then have your fingers in Switzerland in some way. That's what it is. And it's so obvious. Again, like that's the most important point is it is very obvious. It's super easy to figure out how they're doing all of this through NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and Swiss bank secrecy laws.
right.
There's
And
anti-whistleblowing laws there. I mean, it's
right.
ridiculous.
And this P2 lodge is in violation of the Constitution of Italy, which tried to ban secret societies. And you see this picture. It's a fascinating picture because I know the background of Silvio Berlusconi, who came out of the P2 lodge. And his power was based upon the P2 lodge. That was his benefit because he knew this guy. I think it was Agnelli. Can't remember his name. But he was able to get cheaper loans from the Bank of Italy than his competitors, and it allowed him to underbid everything. So the interest rates were lower. And it was all through his connections at P2 Lodge. And there's a really good book called The Sack of Rome, and it's about Berlusconi buying up all the media. So he understood that he could propagandize people, and it got him into becoming the head of the Italian government, like the prime minister. Right? Yeah,
I knew there was something shady about him because he was a member of the P2 Lodge. He was, he's always seen doing, the symbols.
Right,
and
he's got the symbols. He's a party boy. He got busted doing boom boom clubs with underage girls. And there were some of these girls that were in his club. Some died, and there was one that became famous.
And so how do you pronounce his name again?
Berlusconi.
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 He was
Silvio Berlusconi. Look up his real career. This Book of Rome is really good.
Okay.
But it's much more interesting because you had a picture of him like chumming up with George Bush Jr.
Yeah.
They're both part of heavy duty elite occult
secret societies. Yeah, exactly. Skull and Bones to the P2 Masonic Lodge. And what a name too, Propaganda Do.
It's Due, so it's Propaganda 2. Due is the number 2, so it's DUE,
Yeah. So
that's how they pronounce it.
I mean, for a Masonic lodge to have the word propaganda in its name, I mean, that's pretty obvious to people.
And that's just one tendril that came out of that. There are all these other sketchy people and stuff like that.
So you can see in the film how I could have went off the rails on so many things. And that's the thing is, I didn't want to focus too much on P2, but that could be a whole film in itself. I mean,
Oh, no
I
question.
believe if you go look at that list, the list is published. I had it published, and I show it in the film. There's almost 1,000 names on there, and those descendants and those family names are still in power today. So it's still operating. It's still very much functional. It's still a big part of what's going on in this world and what the problem is. So it's very important. It's very important, the P2 Lodge and all those names, which are published.
Right. I mean, yeah,
It's
it's really incredible. And you talk about Coleman's Committee of 300.
yeah,
So
that was
all these groups are all involved in global control and global propaganda. Really, they really are working to reshape the thing with Schwab.
Yeah, that was really weird with Coleman's book. I happened to just pick it up, because we were at home, and I said, well, and I hadn't read it in probably 10 years. So I picked it up and reread it, and I read through it, and I ran across Roche, and I was already studying Roche because of what we talked about, the PCR technology and them being agenda contributors to Davos and the World Economic Forum. And not only that, but Hoffman, the family shareholder and head of Roche, he is the chairman at Chatham House think tank, for the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And I think there's another think tank that he's a big part of, and I can't remember exactly right now, but there's also all these different ties to NGOs, and you see them having ties back to the World Economic Forum. And so when the World Economic Forum announces things like their Great Reset and, all this, and they do what was it, the Event 201 and all this, you see, like, obviously we're supposed to be pointing our fingers at them, right? We're supposed to be pointing our fingers, just like we're supposed to be pointing our fingers at Biden now, right? He's responsible for everything, right? That's how these people work. The aristocrats and the elites and the bloodlines and these families, and they pull the strings and they put these people on television like Biden and Trump so that we can point our fingers and blame them.
Biden isn't making any decisions. The only decision he makes on a daily basis is what flavor of ice cream he's going to have. His brain is gone, dude.
Yeah, I really can't stand the bumper sticker thing with "I did that." It's like, no, you didn't. The Rockefellers and
other people.
Yeah, ExxonMobil. I mean, we can go on for days.
But Rockefeller show up in your documentary too, because the Committee of 300 was started by 3 guys, 2 Italians and 1 American. And who's the 1 American?
Yeah, Rockefeller. Right. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that for years. And that's the thing when I say I don't trust any alternative media anymore, because I've been following this for years and years, the truth movement or whatever you want to call it. And I hear, you hear these things like, you remember when he passed away, when David Rockefeller died, there was this story about him having 7 heart transplants. I'm sure right now people listening are going to say that is true. I don't believe it's true. I dug into it, and I don't even think he had 1 heart transplant, but the dude did live a long time, and he died, and it's a better place now. But he has descendants, he has daughters, and he has shareholders and friends, and that's the thing, but we can't point our fingers and just blame the Rockefeller. And when you realize that for 10 years, no one has really mentioned that the Rockefeller didn't really do it by himself. Like you said, he went to Italy, and the Italian industrialists had these ideas, and that led me down a whole, like this, there's so much in Italy, and there's just so many ties, like you said, with Dr. John Coleman's book, The Committee of 300, having Roche mentioned and so many other things. I was like, wow, it's really obvious. It's really clearly obvious. It's about families, and they're mostly in Switzerland and Italy. It's weird.
Really incredible. Yeah, the Hoffman family's involved, and they're involved in local politics, right? So we've got tendrils all throughout. So these potent families, it's just another example. But this one is very unique because it's in a very small, a mountainous country in the middle, smack dab in the middle of Europe.
Right, which is neutral, and you can't, do anything. They say if there was a nuclear holocaust, that the only thing that would survive is the ants in Switzerland and 1 million Swiss people, right? So, like, it's really interesting. And again, it's in your face. It's in your face. Come check us out. Have some Swiss cheese and some fine chocolate. Check out the ski resorts. It's beautiful, but it is in your face. Like, we dominate and we rule the world, literally, through international NGOs and pharmaceutical companies is how they pulled this off. And it's just mind blowing with Roche. Again, like to this day, it's been 2 years. This film has been out now for quite some time, and I'm still not hearing anybody talk about Roche. I mean, nobody. It's still just Pfizer and
the World Economic Forum. A lot of these politicians around are all, some of them got their training were brought up through the WEF, which is being financed by Roche, right?
Yeah, global leaders, isn't that what he calls them?
Yeah. And there was a guy, this like blipped on the screen and disappeared, but there was a guy from Canada. I think he was a member of parliament. He was researching the incursion of the World Economic Forum, right? Is it a foundation? I don't know. The WEF into Canada, and he said this is the most dangerous infiltration of the Canadian government ever. And I don't even know what happened to that. But he literally said, and I mean, you can talk about what's happening in the United States too, is that those people, those global leaders really are global leaders. They're in all countries, India, China, US, Canada. It's amazing.
And, Ian Davis in his book, Pseudo Pandemic, he talks about that. He doesn't really focus on Switzerland, like I did in the film, but he talks about the global public-private partnerships. And now that's actually a thing that has its own Wikipedia page. And this is a business model. Again, there's a full interview on my website, wolfclanmedia.org, where you can watch me and Ian talk about everything in his book and bless you. And basically, the global public-private partnership it literally happens on small levels all over the place. I mean, if you think about how things like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is compartmentalized, the guy sitting at his desk doesn't really know how the whole place is operating. And that's very much how things like September 11th and this happen, is because there's compartmentalization. You know that as well as I do. And a lot of people know that, but they don't realize that that's a business model called the public-private partnership. And it's getting, schools and NGOs and governments and private sector and public sector to all work together on something. That way, no one really knows what the end goal is. And what Ian says is he believes there's a global public-private partnership that is like a single cohesive thing that runs the entire globe, basically. And I'm saying that's true, but it's located in Switzerland, and it's not just one entity. It's like you said, it's the World Economic Forum itself is a partnership. You've got people coming from all different NGOs and all different areas, government leaders, everything you can think of coming to the World Economic Forum to come up with ideas. And they're not making policy. They are shaping public policy, but not, it's not definitive. It's ideas. And it really, I think that helps them with the plausible deniability, if you will. It's like, oh, we didn't say to do this. It was just an idea, like the whole you'll own nothing and you'll be happy that they put out that went viral. You'll just rent everything. And now they're talking about stakeholder capitalism and them being the trustees of the global commons, which is basically everything from information space to And so it's
they
like
have a plan to control everything.
Yeah, and they don't put it down in writing, so to speak. They meet, they talk about it at the forum, and then leaders who are members of the forum go back and implement it into their country through policy. It's very, very compartmentalized, and the public-private partnership is probably the most important part of it. But I think it's very much headquartered out of Switzerland. It's obvious.
That's all there. All those word jumble acronyms are all in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Right? The BIS, the WEF, all of them.
Yeah. And they want you to point your finger at Bill Gates. They want you to say, Gates, Bill Gates is doing all of this. And again, like Bill Gates, he runs Gavi. Gavi is the, Vaccine Alliance. If you go to Gavi's website, which is located in Switzerland, again, with the Club of Rome, located in Switzerland, started with the Rockefellers, again, and this is located there. But if you go to Gavi's website, it says on their website that their goal is to create new markets. And that's what they did. That's what this whole last 2 years was. They created a new market. They're the Vaccine Alliance. They create markets for vaccines to sell. And that's the thing. But when you look at that aspect of it and you focus on Bill Gates and vaccines and that, then you're never going to see the big picture, which is people like Roche and those family shareholders and these aristocrats who think they're better than all of us. And that's the real goal. It's not about, whatever idea that people are coming up with to blame and point at Bill Gates. I know that stuff is popular, but really it's about control. And you know that as well as I do, whether it's the old world order or the new world order. And it's interesting, if you look at the Swiss flag, it has the Templar cross, right? Up and down. Sean Ross, a researcher, pointed out, he's the only person I know talking about Switzerland. His name is Sean Ross. He has a channel on YouTube called Gure. And he speaks French, Italian, and German, and he lived there for 20 years. So he really knows, he knows. He was harassed by the police and imprisoned. But yeah, he has mentioned to me that that represents how, there used to be a vertical rule. And I thought that was interesting because I spoke with you about this, and you told me something I never heard before, which was that some people refer to the New World Order as the Old World Order. And he was talking about how the Old World Order is a vertical rule, like the king down, to the peasants, and how the New World Order is a horizontal rule. And that's all represented in the, Swiss flag, the Templar cross, a horizontal rule meeting a vertical rule. And so he's saying, the New World Order was created a long time ago, in Switzerland being the first democracy. And it's interesting that they call themselves the first democracy, because they were. And it's just like this idea of king's rule still, but for 4 years at a time, right? They're little puppets in office. It's very, very interesting. But I would say the New World Order is already here. It's been here for quite some time. And I think that they would rather accomplish the Old World Order, like you mentioned to me that day. That was very profound.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, go look at these people who run. I mean, it's old families puppeteering. Everything. The prime minister is just a figurehead in the UK for the king, right? Of queen.
And like Crowley, like when you mentioned about Crowley and his ideologies and wanting them to be policy, if you look at, that's what he said, they wanted like a top-down rule, aristocrats enslaving the rest of humanity.
They want neo-feudalism. They want a feudal order. These people, due to this control of the commons and everything, it's just a kind of gentler nomenclature than we're going to take everything and you're going to get nothing. We'll just manage the commons for you. You guys just don't do anything. Don't even complain. I bet they have policies in place for people who complain. That's where things get really scary, because nobody's going to really like this.
Oh, yeah. And we can just imagine all the thought crime that's already starting to kind of come. And it's very Orwellian, and it's already, and that's the thing. It seems like now the masses are so hypnotized that they just have to snap their finger with a new variant or something, and we can dive right back into it. And I was
interesting because some of the pictures there feature Al Gore. He's one of the worst global propagandizers ever, because you can go back and watch his Inconvenient Truth. Nothing came true. It was just a big scare propaganda nightmare. Yeah.
And
he flies around to Davos and flies in his jet. Oh gosh, you got to watch your carbon footprint. He tried to create a carbon market that he could rig.
Yeah, he was one of the first. He was one of the first climate, like Greta Thunberg puppets. He was one of the first ones. Yeah, it's interesting because back then nobody really was, and it was interesting timing too with all the Bush stuff and everything, right? Yeah.
I mean, and you include Trump. Trump has a sketchy background. Some of these people who see him as the great savior or paladin are just totally deluded. I mean,
I hate to,
Roy Cohn and all these other characters. He was supposed to be the protege. I don't know if you know this, but he was the guy who bought Resorts International, which is a known mafia front.
I did not
know heard that story?
No, I did not know that. Wow.
And they never talk about that. Nobody on the right will ever talk about that. But he became the major shareholder of Resorts International, which I think was a Lansky operation. And people have researched that. And
I did not know that.
There's pictures of him with Trump with Robert Maxwell. So many characters. Robert Maxwell is incredible. But
and again, look.
Just one more thing. Have you ever heard of Mark Lombardi?
No.
He was an artist, but he was kind of like one of the early kind of parapolitical artists. But it wasn't art in a conventional sense. He was a reader and researcher who would put together art pieces of weird kind of global events, BCCI, Resorts International, all these things that happened. But he would make a drawing and people could look at it and see the web of networks. and it was pre-internet. So I can't remember the name of this type of chart,
Oh, that sounds
but you
cool.
could look at it and see the names and things that happen. I'm going to do a show on him. I think I'm going to put up that stuff because I know a lot about
that. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, look up Mark Lombardi and just start researching his stuff. It's really interesting because you can see these names. Like you can look into the Resorts International stuff, and it's like seeing the global underground, what Trump was involved with.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I didn't know that. I'll save that.
yeah, so that's like a real backstory. But that Resorts International was kind of a hotel chain that I think was a laundering scheme. I don't remember the exact stuff about it, but it's just you just know that there is a network. Lombardi died suspiciously. You can see a documentary about him.
Yeah.
He had just had his major art show, so it's kind of like a real achievement for an artist to be shown in a gallery, right? So he had this kind of recognition he wanted, and then supposedly 3 days later he kills himself.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. That's interesting.
Yeah, look up Mark Lombardi and
New
really
York.
good stuff. There's really, I mean, for a researcher, you can see that the stuff that's happened over the last few decades goes back before that. But it is
and
a phenomenon of globalization. I think that a lot of there wasn't these corporate entities and power networks that work through corporations 150 years ago. It was families and stuff. But now you just go, and he did one on the Nugent Hand Bank, which was super sus, which I've done a show on. And just all these banking kind of guys that are full of baloney. But yeah, look up Resorts International. There's a book on that too.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and he's New York. And again, the ties, the weird ties, like I found to New York City and September 11th, involving the mafia and these names and Donald Trump even. And I don't know if you've seen like some of the I know some people call it predictive programming, but I think there's a psychological priming would probably be the better terminology for it. But like, seeing, in media, the predictions of everything that's going to happen and Donald Trump being involved in all that. And it just, all that stuff struck me. Like even the construction companies, I don't know if you noticed, all the construction companies he used were, mafia and things like that. So again, like burst people's bubble with the Trump thing. It's really unfortunate because I kind of fell for that just very slightly until he went and did that. I mean, he was in office for a day when I changed my mind.
Right. Well, I've been around for long enough to know that that's the general tactic of switching to a new president or party is is going to be your savior. That's what they tell the public.
Yeah.
The insiders know it's their boy.
It's weird. You've got more experience than I do in that, but I've noticed that my whole life. From what I can remember throughout my, I'm only 30 years old, but what I remember is Clinton. No, I remember Papa Bush, Clinton, Baby Bush, and back and forth. It's been a little back and forth game, and here we are again now with Biden. And I predict, and I'm going to say this right now openly, that Ron DeSantis, this Florida guy, who's been playing the right, but really playing the truth side. I mean, he even called the Ministry of Truth and everything. I think he will be our next president. I'm almost positive that. I think what's his name? That Shapiro guy, facts don't care about your feelings guy. He endorsed him. He said we can't really endorse Trump anymore because he had too much baggage. So DeSantis, and I do think DeSantis will be our next guy, and we'll just have a back and forth. We'll get another Democrat liberal after that.
Right.
It's just like
back and forth, and he's a Yale undergrad, I think. So you're just never going to get rid of the Yale people who are part of some of these secret societies. We're never going to. I mean, that's like how you crown your study at Yale is you don't necessarily become a bonesman, but you go into one of these other ones.
And that's important, William. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's if people watching are interested, that is pretty much my biggest message nowadays is just don't vote because these people are puppets. And it's not about like you get a lot of people who are like, they play the clip of Biden calling himself a Zionist. And they're like, yeah, it's the Zionist, and he's a Zionist. Well, he went to a Jesuit school. So, it's not about religion. People need to realize that it's very much about what you just said about secret societies and brotherhood. It's all about fraternity. And I didn't really put a lot of it in the film, but I did mention there's this professor from UCLA who wrote a very complex paper. It was pretty difficult for me to read. It's all about fraternity and how fraternity basically throughout history has built the greatest bond and trumps everything. I mean, even family blood, like just fraternity, brotherhood. right? And it's very interesting that every president but two has been a fraternity brother. And all these people, you know, we get a lot, like I said, pointing at this religion or that religion or this country or that country. But people have to realize it's about secret societies that don't care about countries, and they don't care about ethnicities or any of that. They care about rule, you know, like aristocrat rule. It's classism. I think classism is the most important thing that we need to focus on and destroy. And I'm totally anti-politics. I had someone recently said I make videos about politics, but I don't. I'm anti-politics. I don't think you should vote for any puppet, because it really is. It's the same thing. And we need to figure out who is pulling their strings.
Right. Well, look, I mean, Clinton was supposed to be some independent guy from Arkansas. That's the way he put it out. But when George Bush Sr. died, he was there at the hospital.
Yeah,
and he was always a puppet. He was a puppet. He went to the round. What's the round table? Oh God, he went to that secret society in England, and that he was handled by George Bush Sr. and he was probably some type of bastard son of a Rockefeller.
And the Rhodes, and
he was
then,
a Rhodes Scholar.
Go back to like Nixon and Reagan at Bohemian Grove. That picture, to me, I remember when I first saw that. I know people here have seen that photo of Nixon and Reagan at Bohemian Grove. That, I think that tells it all. That tells the story of, you know, what's really going on when it comes to politics. And so I'm very anti-political.
And actually, it's something that's been kept from the American public. But if you look at almost all societies, even pagan societies, societies that aren't European, there's always this weird social structure, control over religion, and secret groups and organizations within there that maintain it.
Interesting you point that out, because the term synarchy, which I mentioned just very briefly, there's a great author, and I think it's important to tell people that her name is Amy Says WTF. She basically vanished, but she was putting out a lot of work during the pandemic, and she put out a book called Synarchy. And the term synarchy basically means what you just said. It's like this rule by a secret elite. And when you start looking into that, you realize that, like you said, throughout history, I mean, back to medieval times, in medieval times, it was the Rosicrucians, but and Crowley talked about this as well. Like, there's always been some secret society to safeguard the government, and that's literally the terminology that was used. One of the occultists who they credit with coining the term synarchy as a political idea, he says that, and having the Rosicrucians, having the Knights Templars back even further, and then now today, as I pointed out in the film, modern day Masonic lodges. These are part of this, you know, background safeguard for the government, and it's very much how this stuff happens and how they're able to pull off these psyops,
false flags, all kinds of social engineering, manipulation, just incredible stuff. And then so you don't see the tendrils, the puppeteering. If you research Gottlieb like you did, it's just like you could never see him. I had the misfortune of being with somebody who watches Fox News on the daily, and he showed up all the time, man. He was there every day. Like, they just put him on. Let's go to Scott Gottlieb.
And that's very interesting, because he was when Bush, it's such a spider web, and it's so obvious. But when Bush was in office, he hired Gottlieb to become FDA deputy commissioner, you know, not head commissioner, but deputy, you know, second man in charge. And when he did that, Gottlieb was working for Roche, and Gottlieb was also with this group. I can't think of who they are, American something, but what they are is they're like asset management for different clients, and some of their clients are Pfizer and Roche and huge. So they have a whole bunch of McDonald's, I mean, corporate up just, and they manage stuff for them. And then you see he works for them. And it's very interesting, because when that happened, Bush ordered a whole bunch of Tamiflu. Well, who made Tamiflu? Roche Pharmaceuticals. So even back in 2005, 2009, when we had that other, you know, scare of a pandemic, we sold. And that's the thing, again, for people who think the government's doing this to us. No, in that case, it's Big Pharma. Big Pharma tells the government, you know, this is going to happen. You need to buy all this. And all the governments around the world stockpile Tamiflu. And it doesn't even work. I mean, they're under a lawsuit right now. And they're losing.
It wouldn't be the first time they sold snake oil. These guys are snake oil salesmen.
Exactly.
They just put it in a corporate form, like organized crime. It's so important.
That's what
they've gotten busted so many times selling stuff. even the whole psychiatric community, even some of these psych meds. I know the statin drugs have like 0.2 efficacy, like nothing. You could go out for a walk each day and improve your statins more than the statin drugs.
It's they're either making fake drugs or they're killing you with them. Like literally. I mean, remdesivir, I've heard so many stories, and I've heard firsthand accounts.
I know 2 people whose family members died from remdesivir.
It's a Roche product. It's absolutely disgusting. And they even try to twist that up to make you point at Gilead Sciences and some of these other companies. But if you really
do you know that the production of remdesivir is so dangerous that people like have to wear masks because it has cyanide in it?
Well, I did
cyanide. Yeah, go look, just read the drug itself. Like it has to go through 52 permutations of different chemical treatments or reactions. I'm not a chemical.
And that's the thing. Like, really, if you want an idea of who these people are, because this is a family-owned company. This isn't just people who hire employees. They are very strict. I have a little portion of an interview where he talks about how climate change is part of their company policy because the family says so. And generation after generation, that will continue. And if you want an idea of who they are, the best book for people to read is Stanley versus Roche, or Adams versus Roche. Stanley Adams was a whistleblower who worked for them. He blew the whistle. And that's what was so weird. I found the Committee of 300 book by Coleman. I read it. It mentioned Roche. It didn't mention Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. It mentioned Roche. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They own PCR, and I was already digging into them. So I hadn't decided to make a film yet. I just thought, wow. And he mentioned a friend. He didn't say who the friend was, but he said a friend of his blew the whistle. It took me quite some time to dig, but I was digging, and that friend's name was Stanley Adams, and he wrote a book called Adams versus Roche. And I was just mind blown. I read that book, and even though it's a true story about this man's life who was imprisoned, his wife committed suicide because she was harassed by the Swiss authorities. And that's when I realized the Swiss government and the Roche pharmaceutical are like hand in hand. They work together, and he was charged with industrial espionage, like trading secrets. And he was charged by the Swiss government because he told them that. And if you look again, the markup for vitamin, that affects everybody. People, I don't know how to articulate it, but it is everything. It's in Gatorade. It's everything. And that is Roche. They're the biggest suppliers of vitamins.
And the profit margin is off the charts, right?
It's insane. And that's what when people see something on Fox that says the supply chain and you want to blame Bill Gates or somebody, it's Roche Pharmaceuticals. They affect the supply chain by changing the price of vitamins. And again, like you said, the profit margin is off the chain. And this the
supply chain is a maintenance of artificial scarcity. It's very important.
Yeah.
So people have to pay more money. That's the whole gas thing. It's artificial scarcity. They created artificial scarcity. They're at war with the average person. And all these people are. There's no question about it.
It's disgusting. Yeah, and when you say that, you make me think of like Bayer and Monsanto and how they like made non-regenerative seeds. Like they made it illegal. Like that's a crime against
humanity. They are engaged in crimes against Earth and violations of the Nuremberg Code. No question.
It's a violation against nature. Like, how do you stop seeds from growing? And like, these people are sick, and a lot of people think like, maybe this is all over because they met their quota. Maybe they sold enough or they got enough people injected. But I would say that it's really just about control. And it was just another thing. That's why you saw the numbers again. I don't know if people, noticed that, but, the weird, strange numbers, COVID-19, 19 years after September 11th, we're 19 hijackers. And it's just, I pointed that out in the Big Idea film a little bit, but it's just, you see these numbers because of what you just said, the secret societies. When you go to Yale and you enter into your brotherhood and your fraternity, you're learning things, and there's a reason you become a politician. So it's important people know what's really going on and don't just say Biden is jacking up the prices, man. It's like, no, he's not.
Create these networks. Like that's why you go to those colleges, is to create that network.
Yeah.
Fraternity, or go to a fraternity at a higher school of learning or something. That's
and like you said, and all that stuff, like you were talking about the artificial scarcity and like the jacking up of the prices and like the inflation right now, right? And everything's going on. That's all manipulated. That's all manipulated. And it's crazy because the common everyday economist has no idea. The person who literally went to school free economy. It has no idea, and yeah, I'm sitting here saying that I'm smarter than some people that went to school for this, because they have no idea that this is all manipulated by aristocrats, and it's pretty easy to figure it out, if
I
you
think
just
you can figure it out. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the biggest frauds ever perpetrated upon the American people is that we don't have an aristocracy in the United States. It's total baloney.
Yeah,
We have
no.
a full on, you have a full on American elite. I'm sorry to
Yeah, I don't know what your opinion is, but I really think this whole country is a giant social experiment. I've said this in other interviews.
part of
I
it is.
think the British India Trading Company, East India Trading Company, and when Columbus, which wasn't his real name, and his hand symbol founded the New World, like none of that is what you think. When people are like, this isn't what our constitutionalists, which I used to be one, like this isn't what our founding fathers want, and they go on about the First Amendments and this, you have to actually realize that this has always been like set up. We've had a New World Order probably since 1776. I mean, seriously.
Not on this global. There wasn't the ability for travel and communication.
Yeah,
so we're in a really dangerous area because
you pointed that out in our last talk. Something is happening that's never happened before because of the internet and travel. I totally agree with that, and maybe it's.
But biblical. I think you're right. I mean, you can look at Bacon's New Atlantis. They were thinking on those terms when they looked at the U.S. and the British government. I mean, the revolt happened. The colonial revolt happened. But there's still people's ideas about the U.S. You can just look at all the Masonic symbolism, House of the Temple, DC, and they have a completely non-constitutional view. And a lot of the people who have a lot of power, Kissinger, do not give a rat's butt about the vote.
Yeah,
or,
and you know what blew me away,
William? Of the people, yeah.
What blew me away that I didn't know that I showed in the film, and that if people aren't aware, is that this country wasn't even founded. It was founded 100 years earlier by Jesuit settlers from the Roman Catholic Church. That was mind blowing. And where is that? That's where the Frederick National Laboratory is. That's where Fauci is, the NIC, all these places which are set up in Maryland, and next to Virginia, the Virgin Mary, and the District of Columbia in between. So like you said, with the Masonic symbolism, there's a lot of symbolism back towards the Catholic Church in Rome. And we have a Jesuit Pope today, which for the first time in history. So it's very interesting. I know there's ideas. Some people say that the Catholic Church is good, but it was infiltrated by the Jesuits. Other people think that your church has always been bad. I'm very torn, so I don't really know.
It's morphed. It's different. It was clearly a function of, at certain points in medieval times, it was a function of the ruling class. They would put one of their family members in as Pope. Right. So it clearly it wasn't independent in any way, shape, or form at certain times. And it's always been a power. It's always tied with power. It has an immense amount of power.
Very much. Oldest, most
changed. Powerful. It's not the same. It doesn't have currently it doesn't have the same draw that it might have had 50 years ago, at least in the States.
What's interesting is you notice I caught this right on the top of the Vatican is a name, Borghese. That family is still very much around. They're part of, mafia.
No, I think one of the Borghese or Borgias and was known as the Black Pope or the Black Count or the Black aristocrat in the 20th century.
And they're involved in banking, and you have the Torlonia family, and then these families are still around. They, like you said, they do royal intermarriage, marry their cousins, and weird things like that. And
just to give you a kind of interesting thing, in the modern Wicca, the Gardnerian Wicca, they refer to an old witch book from Tuscany. So there's like a little element of witchcraft that goes back through Italian style witchcraft that comes up and into the modern
Wicca,
modern world of the occult and witchcraft. It's pretty amazing.
Oh wow, I had no idea. Yeah, well, no,
I'll send you that link. We're at about an hour. I got to run, buddy. Where's the best place for people to watch this documentary?
Yeah, you can see the film on wolfclanmedia.org.
And I'll send you this Lombardi stuff. I'll probably do a show. I think you'll find it very fascinating. I'll give you the links. I'll put the links up and do a live stream, and people can look at it, because he's putting together. He's thinking almost like a modern internet researcher prior to the internet, but he was ahead of his time, and he was very, you call it autistic, or, he just could focus on these stories, and he did it for himself. Like there's a documentary said, I wanted to understand. That's why I made these for my own benefit. And then people would walk by, and in the documentary, people would just sit there and stare. Like somebody will see a thing of art and stare at it and walk on, but people stop and something's going on, clicking in their brain because they're seeing all these connections. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I
So
saw
Mark
some
Lombardi.
that looked interesting. You could send me that sack of Rome too, because that's interesting too. I definitely want to.
I'll put a link in the show notes, and I'll send you that. I'll send you that link. That's it. Berlusconi's a whole nother story. And there were it was like Epstein. They were clearly involved in sex and blackmail.
Yeah.
Things going on there. So they were, it was bad. It was bad.
Yeah,
it was Italian Epstein, and it was all over the Italian media. They just knew what was going on. So anyway, Chris, great to talk with you again, and keep up the great work. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care. Yeah, take care.